it was just fun, man. That kind of creativity just gets me going. I just love it. There's an element of risk. Like that could have gone really not so good.
Hey investors, Bradley here from Watson Estates, and you're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Friends, I'm glad you could join us today. Now, when you look at a property, you're probably thinking, you know what, can I buy and hold? Is there an opportunity in here to maybe get a bit of lift? But my guest today, man, do they have a unique approach to finding properties and getting that return that some people will never even spot. I have a privilege today of speaking with Ryan Carr. I know you're going to love this show. He's got over 50 deals he's completed. He's a regular contributor to Canada Real Estate Wealth magazine. He shares his book with us as well on the show if you wanted to learn more. But the conversation is specific to, one, zoning and some of the opportunities that are in there, but also as a larger perspective, the highest and best use. Is there a higher and best use to this property? He shares with us a few really interesting stories. So maybe we've been looking at real estate deals in such a boring fashion that we're missing so many opportunities that guys like Ryan can come in and take complete advantage of. I know you guys are going to learn a lot. If and when you do, please hit that like and subscribe to this channel. We're going to continue to put out fantastic content. Enjoy the show. Ryan, thank you for taking some time to join us on the show. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks so much for having me on. This is great.
I am super excited because we love to have different investors with different angles. And sometimes it does kind of feel like a broken record. We get a lot of people with the same strategies, but you throw all of that out the window. And so I'm excited to talk about some of the cool things you're doing in our market. And before we get into it, for people who maybe haven't seen some of the cool work you're doing, could you share with us a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah. So again, Ryan Carr, 33 years old, recently just turned out my 50th deal. So we're up over 50 properties now. I specialize in highest and best use, and highest and best use we'll get into a little bit later on tonight, but basically it lets me buy all kinds of different deals and do different things. My background, I started off as an auto mechanic, fixing cars, building armored vehicles, a lot of welding and machining and working with my hands. I was doing that. I was flipping houses and doing rentals and stuff on the side. And one day the employer came to me and said, "Hey, we're laying everybody off, everybody out." So I was out with no job, and I came home, told my wife, and she said, "Well, you were pretty good at real estate these last couple of years. Why don't you go and do that full time?" So I took a little bit of real estate that I had done at that point and turned it into a full-fledged business like we have today.
Yeah, and the way you do things is definitely unique. I don't know if I could say it's ADD, but it feels almost from the outside when I'm watching it, it feels like ADD. Tell us a little bit about like how when you walk in, like what are you looking for? You got 50 deals, but I know you're running like 10 of them at a time at any given point. So when you're approaching these, like what are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'm, just like we talked about before the show here, I'm an opportunity guy. So a lot of people niche down and they say, I want to do buy and holds, I want to do flips, rent to owns, multifamily, land development, all this stuff. For me, I think that's amazing. I just like to keep things really, really fresh and exciting and new. And I find that when you open your horizons a little bit more, you don't have to go into your into a completely uncomfortable zone. But when you open your horizons a little bit more, you're able to take on opportunities where other people typically might not see them. So for me, I like to focus on all those areas. Land development is a lot of fun, infill development, construction, stuff like that. Done a bunch of those, got a bunch of those coming down the pipe. Multifamily, we're working on a couple buildings. I've got some low-rise apartment buildings that I'm doing between now and 2022. They're already in the pipe. And then we throw in some basement apartments and flips and coach houses and all that stuff in the mix. So it's a lot of fun.
People are getting a little bit of a taste of what I'm talking about here. There's a lot going on.
I love it.
So, okay. So now are you approaching these, like, I know you've got that kind of hands-on background. Like, are you hands-on on any of these, or do you have teams, and how far do they stretch?
Yeah, I started off fully hands on the tools. So I was a mechanic. I really didn't know anything about real estate or construction. And this was 2012. So I've been doing real estate full time since 2014. So about 7 years now, 7 years. And I started off just like doing my own deals. I found the property on the MLS, I fixed it myself, hung the drywall, painted the walls, found the tenants, did the management, did the financing, like kind of did it all. And in 2012, 2014, the YouTube game and the podcast and stuff, like that was not like what we have today, with awesome shows. And so back then I was just kind of doing a little bit on YouTube, trying to learn from whoever was putting out free content. And so, yeah, I started off doing all the work myself. And then eventually I was carrying sheets of drywall in from the driveway one day, and this neighbor comes out from one of the properties I was fixing, and he goes, "Hey, like, you want a hand with that?" You know, it was a windy day and blowing all over the place with this drywall. He goes, "You want a hand?" I was like, "Yeah, I really do. You know, I really do." And that was my first employee. So I brought him on full time, and then it was a second guy and a third guy, and now we typically run with 2 to 3 full-time crews. Some of them are T4 staff. Some of them are sub trades, depending on the market that we're operating in. But like at any one time, we've got 10 to 15 open job sites in the pipe in various phases of development. And that's what helps me get up in the morning, and that's what fills my day.
How far are these places that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm predominantly a Durham region investor, all the way out into the Belleville market. So kind of that 401 corridor is where I typically focus. I like to niche down in the markets. I think you've got to learn your market. You've got to understand it. If you're like a big time condo developer where you're doing one deal every 5-10 years, you can pick a market and set your team and go. But for me, there's a little bit more volume involved. So I like to really understand the market demographics behind where I'm investing.
Yeah, and we'll get into how you find these deals as well down the line. But I'm curious. So when you say I'm looking for hidden opportunities, and I know you've kind of listed off a few, but can you give me an example of something you've come across where you're like, I've seen something that someone else hasn't, and it worked out in your favor?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, there's a whole bunch of these. I'll just pick one. A couple of years ago, I did a tiny house in Oshawa. I think this was 2019. The years kind of blend, but I think it was in around 2019. And this house came through my inbox. I look at about 100 deals a week, typically, either private or MLS or whatever. And this deal came through my inbox, and it had 2 municipal addresses, and it was in Durham. And I'm looking at this, and it was like, 2 addresses. It said it had 2 water services. It said it had 2 of all these different things, right? I'm like, this is interesting. So I dove into it, and I realized that what had happened was over the years, one neighbor, I guess, had bought the other neighbor, and they did it so that titles merged. So, they were one title, because that's what happens if you buy your neighbor and it's in the same name, titles merge, it becomes one parcel. So I looked at the way that title read, right? And it was really complicated process, but to simplify, the way that the title read was such that I could sever both of these houses into 2 separate titles on closing day without having to go through the formal land severance process. So when I bought it, I did just that. I closed on closing day, 2 separate titles, bought it for one price, ended up with 2, right? I flipped the one house on, we'll call it the left side, and then the house that was on the right side was a 253 square foot, we'll call it detached tiny house. And that tiny house, for me, that drew so much attention. We were in we're CNN or BNN Bloomberg. We were in the Toronto Star. We were 100,000 hits on Facebook. This thing completely blew up. And the house itself, 253 square feet. We fixed it up, super cute. CP24 came through. And for me, we made a few bucks doing that deal, which was great. But I just think that the marketing and the allure behind it was so much fun that was one of those deals that 99% of the people would have never seen the way the title was, or the way that the water and the hydro and all this was serviced and all that. So when I was able to split these 2 lots, it was something completely different that nobody had truthfully ever done in this market before.
Did they see that though? Did they report on that maneuver, or it was just the fact the house was small as everyone was looking at that?
Yeah, so nobody reported on that at all. I came up with that on my own. I saw the way the title was, so I called my lawyer and I said, "Hey, do you see what I see here?" In this case, it was in it was in a subdivision, or a registered plan of subdivision, such that both houses were on their own whole lots. Whereas in land development, there's a term called a part lot. And a part lot is basically when somebody takes a farm, they cut it up into all these different lots, and that's where you put your house, right? Well, basically what I had bought was 2 farms, even though they were very, very small, like little 30 by 110 lots. And I was able to subdivide on closing day. So that's kind of how that took place on the back end. But it was just fun, man. That kind of creativity just gets me going. I just love it. There's an element of risk. That could have gone really not so good. And my lawyer at the time, he was like, even he was kind of sweating it. He was like, "I know I've given you some good advice here, and I know my craft, but until it actually happens, you never fully know." Right. And it worked out. It was great.
Not to mention the media attention too. It just adds that extra.
Yeah. Fun.
So clearly there is a maneuver there that happened at the zoning point. So you look deeper and then you figured that out. Do you ever go backwards? Do you ever look for zoning and you're like, I see these areas, maybe you did that and you're thinking maybe there's another one on the same street and you kind of work your way backwards in order to get those opportunities? Or is it more of that kind of passive through your network you've created?
Zoning is an interesting topic. I think zoning, it's one of the three ways that I look at deals, and zoning is this like hidden gem that not enough people really look into. 10 years ago, the basement apartment wave was like the hot ticket, right, for a lot of duplex investors. I think that some infill development and some creative strategies is really the next basement apartment. And when people hop on this bandwagon and they realize, hey, this is what zoning actually does for you. This is what zoning does for density. This is what the government bill 108 will do for triplexing or coach houses or something similar to that, like something of that nature. I mean, that's the opportunity. That's the game. And as property prices creep up and people say, okay, 2 units is no longer cutting it to debt service this property, I need to cut the roof off and put a 3rd story on, or I need to build a coach house out back, or I need to do something else to drive the value and the cash flow here. I think that's where we're headed.
I think we're already there. My curiosity is if with the coach house thing, like I know in Toronto, people are smart to it now. It's like I have an extra ability, even though it's not there, they're kind of figuring that out. Do you still find, I guess you're still seeing there's opportunities, maybe not in the direct city, but in these submarkets too, that allow the same thing?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, all across the GTA, you go like right from Guelph to Hamilton to Toronto with laneway houses to, all the way out east, Belleville, Kingston, some towns up north. A lot of places actually already had the whole coach house thing in their bylaw, not as a 3rd unit, but as a 2nd, right? So it was already there. So when Bill 108 came through, even though it's still in the proposal phase, I mean, for a lot of cities, this is going to be awesome, A, for intensification, but B, for investor community, where you can still bump the rents and afford to debt service. You guys are in Toronto, $1 million homes, $1.5 million homes. It's a big ticket, $2 million house. How do you cash flow that, right? So you got to think about those ways.
Yeah. Okay. So you just briefly, I'm gonna zero in. You said zoning was one of 3 things. You got to give us the other 2, unless they were built in there somewhere. What are some of the other things you look for?
I'm not a coded guy. None of these are coded. So there's 3 things that I look for in every single deal, right? It's the highest and best use of the land, the highest and best use of the structure, and the highest and best use of your own skill sets and time, right? Those are the 3 things. So zoning would be a component to land, right? And the other 2, as I mentioned. And when you take all 3 of those things and you really look at, okay, what can I do with each element of those? That's how I'm finding deals, right? And we'll just pick one, like highest and best use of your own skill sets and time. If you're a duplex investor, you're probably not going to be the same guy that's going to build an institutional building like a hospital, right? 2 completely different styles. If you're an infill developer, are you going to build a hospital? No, probably not. But could you parlay some of those skills over to build that thing? Yeah, you might be able to do it. So, I mean, that skill sets and time. In terms of land, density, setbacks, zoning regulation, like we talked about. Are you in floodplain? Are you not in floodplain? Are you on a major arterial road? Do you back onto the 401? All of these things I'm looking at in terms of land. And then in terms of the structure, sometimes you got to look at that house and say, does it make sense to keep it? Or does it make sense to take it down, right? And if you keep it, what do you spend? What do you do? Duplex, triplex, single family, flip, buy and hold. Or if you whack it down, what can you put back in its place?
Now, so are you focusing on specific markets? Because you're clearly familiar with all across the GTA. Are you saying like, these are for this city, these are what I see as the best opportunities, and you're kind of like reminding yourself this is where we're going to look? Like I get that. I can almost hear the way you're thinking as you're kind of approaching these, because you're familiar with all these back end things. Well, a lot of people ignore.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the general strategy can take place anywhere. I hone in on Durham, and I hone in out the 401 corridor because I understand it. I like the demographics there. They make sense. I think the prices are a little bit more affordable than west of the city, just my opinion, right? Everybody likes different areas for different reasons. Like I'm not a big Airbnb guy, but there's tons of guys completely crushing in the Airbnb space. Even through COVID, some people are still just doing really, really well. So, I mean, it just depends on where you want to hone in. I, for one, know Durham. I understand it. Like in particular, I've gone through the zoning bylaws and I'm like, okay, what can we do here? What can we not do here? And then same thing for that whole 401 corridor. It's important for you to niche down. And when you niche down, then you can go wide again. But if you're trying to understand Hamilton and Oakville and Toronto and Oshawa and Belleville and Kingston and Barrie and all these different places, you could get lost in the weeds.
I see. Gotcha. Okay. So you said you looked at 100 deals a week. Now I'm curious if these are off market, if they're on market, if it's a mix. Like with the market we're in, even in like, especially Durham, like it is extremely competitive right now. So how do you get 10 to 15 deals at any given point that are not just deals, but good ones? Like I'm very curious to find out that search that you do.
Yeah. So it's a mix. So I'm on like every wholesaler's list for one. So any deal that comes up, I see it, right? That's good. I do my own off-market deal marketing. So we get a couple calls here and there, depending on how many flyers go out, right? That's how I'm finding deals, is flyers, yellow letters. So between wholesalers, that MLS, and then just word of mouth through the network, I just get tons of deals coming through. And truthfully, like 99% of these properties aren't deals, right? And I think that's one thing that a lot of investors miss the boat on, is that just because it's presented to you as an opportunity doesn't mean it's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So for me, like I say 1% of deals are actually deals, and I mean it. Like there's just deals out there that may seem cheap, but are they undervalued? Because I don't want to buy cheap, I want to buy undervalued. And the biggest, like Warren Buffett's the biggest guy that does this. He says he wants to buy $1 for 66 cents, and he's not wrong. If you could buy a house that's worth $1 million for 700,000 or 666 in his case, like I think that's a pretty good deal. But if you can buy a house for 600,000 that's actually worth 500,000, that's not a great deal. So those are the ones that I just say, thanks, but no thanks. I'm still going to do my quick analysis on it, back of a napkin kind of thing, and run with that, and just pass it up. And if I can help somebody else out in the process, then I do that too.
Yeah. And a good deal to one person isn't a good deal to another as you get more seasoned. And I think I want to dive into this highest and best use thing in a moment, because clearly you've seen the light in a lot of ways that I even haven't. Like you've got so much experience in these different ways that you see a gem when everyone else sees a tiny house. Right. So what is that highest and best use? Like what are some of these examples, or is there a general trend to a certain type of units? Does it tend to be, if we can get a multifamily, that's the highest and best use generally, or is it going towards a commercial? Maybe it's retail. Like, is there any common path or navigation that people should be keeping in mind, even if they're not attacking it, just as it relates to finding that deal?
So like a lot of people, when they're seeing, we'll just say your cookie cutter bungalow, they're thinking, okay, do I have the frontage that's wide enough for an extra parking space? Can I put a basement apartment in this thing? Does the zoning meet that criteria? Okay, let's do the basement apartment. 5 years ago, I started turning that on its head. I said, okay, do I meet the basement apartment criteria for any given city? The answer was yes, right? But then when I said, okay, I want to add a second unit, it was a way that I went about doing those second units that was kind of cool. So I was doing this process called the vertical split. And what I was doing was I was taking bungalows, 2 stories, semi-detached homes, whatever. And rather than doing a basement apartment and a main floor apartment, I was cutting the houses vertically down the center so that you had a front and a rear apartment. Both tenants had 2 levels of living. So it became a townhouse. And when we did that, we still met the 2-unit criteria. There were no development charges payable, which was amazing, right? And both tenants now effectively felt like they had a full house or a grown-up house without being shoehorned into a basement. And consequently, they stay longer and they pay better rent, which means the property cash flows that much better. So that was one way that I was really evaluating highest best use in the 2-unit space.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I would assume you're analyzing also what you do with the property, right? Like some you'd flip, some you'd hold. Do you kind of tackle that at the front end? Like how many exit strategies on typical deal do you have when you're kind of going into it? Or sometimes you're just like, wow, this is such a sweet deal. I just got to get rid of it almost,
all the exit strategies. Do I wholesale it? Do I keep it and hold it? Do I refi all my capital out? Do I leave all my capital in for better cash flow? Do I buy it, close on it and sell it? What do I do? So number one, I think, is I try to be as diverse as possible. So I would say on the whole, I'm like a 50-50 investor. I keep half and I sell half. Lately, I've been keeping more than I sell just because the market's appreciating like bananas, right? So I hang on to it, I cash flow them, I refi my capital back out and recycle it into the next. But I mean, if I'm looking at a deal and I say to myself, hey, I think this is a good opportunity for all of the strategies, but I think it's going to take me too much time to get this property up to speed, either through management, like property management, turning tenants, or renovations. maybe it doesn't make sense to hold that thing because it's too much time, right? Return on time is just as important as return on investment. And I would sell that deal off to somebody who has more time than I do, even though I think the return still may be phenomenal. So I'll take a few bucks, pass it off to the next guy, on to the next deal, right? I'm always looking at that.
And that kind of works into what I'm saying, right? Where you've got some people, one deal to one person is not necessarily a deal to another. So you're at a point now, you've got so many things going on that your time is now another asset that is even more. I think for everyone it's a factor, but for you, it's definitely more of a factor.
It really is. It really is. Return on time is big. I just did a vision board for 2021, and every year I do these things, and it's amazing what comes to fruition, right? When you actually put it up on the wall and you read that thing every Monday or every day or whatever you do, right? And for me, return on time is huge because like I'm only one guy. I can only do so much, right? And my team can only take on so much. And when you start to grow and become the visionary, your time becomes highly sensitive. So yeah, return on time is critical, man.
Do you fund most of these yourself, or do you tend to reach out to joint venture partners, or how does that usually flow for you guys?
I would say the overwhelming majority of properties I do myself. Every now and again, I will take on a strategic joint venture partner if I think the relationship is right. But I don't like people will reach out and they'll be like, hey, I want to do a deal. And then they don't tell me anything about themselves. Like, I want to know about you first as a person, if we're going to get into business together, because the relationship is so much more important than just firing dollars at people, and whether it's me or anybody, like, I think the biggest thing to drill down on is security first, return second, speed third, right? In that order and only in that order. So if you're out raising capital from somebody, whether it's a private investor or a bank or, anybody, like, relationship is number one, because one day you will have a deal that goes shitty. One day it will happen. It's mathematically probable. It's going to happen, right? I've been very fortunate. All of my deals have been positive. Always paid my investors back. I've never had one go south. I'm very cautious on how I buy, and I'm always buying equity, and that's how I'm hedging my bets. But one day you're going to have one that doesn't go well. And that phone call to that person is never a good one to make, and I've never had to make it. But I do know that if I did ever have to make it, A, that person would always be paid back in full, and B, they would say, you know what? I invested with you because I believe in your story, not because I liked that house in that trendy part of town. I think that's really important.
I love it. You're bang on. And I know you're bang on. For our audience purposes, you're bang on. It's totally a relationship. Totally. So because your stories are so great, I'm going to ask you to throw us one more. Okay. Give us another bone. What's another opportunity you moved into where you're like, you saw highest and best use that someone else has missed and it's worked out?
Yeah, sure. Trying to think of a good one. I'm going to do a multifamily deal. I did a 14-plex not too long ago. It was 14 units right on Lake Ontario, which is really, really unique. It was 4 cottages, a detached outbuilding, and then a 6-plex. And when I bought this place, it was like the property was completely upside down. It was half vacant, never worked on in the last 30 years. It was just a mess. So I think what was really neat about this was that I turned over all the units. We renovated the building. Everything was great. We got good market rents, CMHC financing. One of the cool things that I did with the outbuilding was I actually turned a garage that used to be kind of like a boathouse into storage. And it doesn't sound overly creative because it's just like, okay, storage, whatever. But in the residential space, it's kind of neat because it's a value add. But in the multifamily space, as you know, you multiply that out by your cap rate, and you're doing something really good, right? And I was able to pull $75,000 to $100,000 in extra equity just by taking this garage, cutting it up, adding some doors, putting in the separations, right, and renting all of these spaces out to the tenants for a really reasonable price. I forget what the actual rent was, $50 a unit or $100 a unit, whatever, right? And by doing that, it gave them a place to put their bikes and their hockey bags and their golf clubs and all this stuff. It kept the yard clean. Property manager was happy. And it also boosted the equity. And when I did that refi, I refied all my capital out, plus, and the tenants have an awesome place to live right on the lake. So that was one of the neat ones as well.
Man, you got good stories. Just getting started.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give you a platform here. I want you to share with us a little bit about your book that you have out. I think a lot of people will be really quick to say, hey, and then everyone, I encourage you, if you want, leave a comment down in the video. We can kind of respond and have Ryan keep an eye on it. But there's no better way. Like people really, when they craft a book, they're crafting like that is there, and often as a response to a lot of questions that are being received. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what people can get out of that book. And I encourage any of you who are kind of as curious about this as I am to jump in and put a little bit of investment dollars into learning these things, and then reach out to Ryan after you've learned some of his strategies. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure. So the book is the highest and best use playbook, and it's coming out in the spring market 2021. So we're not too far off now. I think it's going to be on Amazon and all the major platforms. I'm going to try and get it into chapters as well, but we'll just keep it online for now. And basically, this book is a lot about what we've been talking about in this podcast. It's the highest and best use of those three things: the highest and best use of the land, the structure, and your own skill sets and time. And in each chapter, I break it down into three major components, right? And then I want to tell a story, and I want to teach a tactic because people love the tactics. And then I want to summarize, or I want to summarize in bullet form notes, so that depending on the mood that somebody's in, they can go and learn that tactic, boom, get it out of the system and use it. Or if they're more of like a storytelling, like a slow to learn, they really want to absorb it and feel the emotion behind a deal, they can get that in a chapter too. And then two, if they want the Cole's notes, they can go right to the end of each chapter, read the Cole's notes and take that and deploy it. So I've been working on it for the last, 6 months or so, just kind of picking away. And I've just really enjoyed putting all of my thoughts and all of these crazy deals that we put together, like, what we're talking about here, and putting them into a book because it's just fun. And I find too that when you write a book or when you coach somebody, I got a few mentor students, you actually learn to teach yourself again, and you simplify things, and you can parlay that into new techniques. And what you learned over on this deal might not make sense anymore because you've got a better way. So throwing that all into text and handing it out to people is what I'm going to do.
That is awesome. Okay. So outside of the book, where can people find you on the social media world?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Why don't we link it up in the show notes so we don't bog it down? But you can get me info@rwcarinvestment.com. That's the best place to get me by email. And most of all, sign up for the book at thehighestandbestuse.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Guys, please show your support for Ryan and all that he's shared with us today. I hope you guys learned some stuff. You can leave that down in the comments if you have any questions. Hit the subscribe button, whatever it takes. Ryan, we definitely got to get you on the show down the line once you've rolled a few more of these stories out, and maybe we'll see you on some other headlines.
I love it. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.